Yes, I know defensive stats for the Seattle Kraken were down last season, but here's why I don't think that was the real issue.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Seattle hockey fans, how you doing? It's a Tuesday, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, Seattle Kraken, every single day. My name is Erica L. Ayala. I'm your host of Locked On Kraken. I am also a contributor to CBS Sports, where I cover women's basketball, a little bit of NHL, sometimes some college softball, and I will be headed to Milano Cortina 2026 to once again cover the women's and men's international ice hockey tournaments. What a time that is going to be. I want to, though, switch gears a little bit today and talk a little bit about the previous two Seattle Kraken administrations. That's right, under Dave Haxtell and Dan Bylsma. And the reason that I'm going there is because I recently caught up with what the gentleman of the Kraken Hockey Network had to say regarding Lane Lambert. Mike Benton got the crew together, Ian Furness, John Forsland, Everett Fitzhugh. Sadly, we didn't get to hear from Allison Lucan or Piper Shaw, who I would love to hear what they have to say about this. No Linda Cohn either, but I digress. The gentleman had some interesting things to say. Some things that I agreed with, some things that I didn't agree with. We're going to break that down in the first segment. Later on the show, I'm going to dive into what Jason Botterill's plan is. And again, this is coming from that same episode with the gentleman from the Kraken Hockey Network and, Kraken Radio and things of that nature. And, Mike Benton and the crew, they said some interesting things. I think Mike was talking with Ian Furness at the time, so I want to get into that. And then I'm going to close by talking about the PWHL protected list, because we know which players, 3 players from each of the 6 PWHL teams are protected. Why does that matter to Seattle hockey fans? Well, because I can tell you who I would pick from players that are unprotected. We'll get into that on today's episode. Okay, the biggest thing for me in listening to the Kraken Audio Network and listening to Mike Benton, again, have a really great mix of the guys. The only guy we didn't hear from was JT Brown. Well, not the only guy, but we didn't hear from JT. We didn't hear from Al. So we were missing some guys. We were missing Allison, Piper, and Linda, but still a good smattering of ideas. And the biggest thing that we kept hearing as an indictment of the Dan Bylsma era of the Seattle Kraken had to do with defense. And listen, I talk about defense all the time. I love talking about defense. I hate talking about Seattle Kraken defense because I've been telling you since season number 1 that our defensive habits, not necessarily our defensemen, but our defensive habits, not good enough. Not good enough. And so while I do attest that the Seattle Kraken definitely plummeted when it came to certain statistics. So when we're talking about defensive stats, exactly what defensive stats were different? Well, I went over to Money Puck and took a look. I'll share the screen quickly with those of you who are watching on YouTube. Okay, so I looked at goals against per 60, expected goals against per 60, attempts against, and then unblocked shots, right? Just to kind of see what was coming towards the net and where the Seattle Kraken ranked. So if we take a look at this screen here on Money Puck, we can see that the Seattle Kraken were 23rd best, as in, not great. Only 9 teams below us at 23rd best in expected goals against per 60. And you can see that expected goals against per 60, 2.63, right? The actual goals against per 60, 2.7. which is an expected goal differential of a negative goal differential. Then if we go to unblocked shot attempts unblocked shot attempts against, 2,974. That, if we were to rank it in number one, is least unblocked shot attempts against to most. The Seattle Kraken are at 28, ranked 28th. And then if you look at shots on goal against, it's 1,873, 1,873, which again, if we rank it from the least being best to the worst, the Seattle Kraken, we scroll down, at 21st. That's for this past season, the 24-25 season, okay? The numbers the year prior, and I can toggle this, I'm not going to put it on the full screen for you, but the year prior, the numbers were better. So if we go to shots on goal against, the Seattle Kraken should be 12th overall at, there it is, 1,887, 1,887. If we go to unblocked shot attempts against, the Seattle Kraken should be 19th overall in this category. There it is, 19th, 2,797, 19th overall. If we go to goals against per 60, the Seattle Kraken will be at 2.14, which puts them 5th overall. And then if we go to expected goals against in the 23-24 season, look at that. I don't even have to scroll down this time. There you go. So those would indicate, right, that things were better defensively. And these stats and some other stats are what people are using to say, oh, look, Dan Bylsma, things didn't work out, yada, 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 baka, baka, baka. Here's what I would say about that. And I didn't pull the goals for and things of that nature, but the 23-24 numbers for the Seattle Kraken, I mean, if we just look at, goals for per 60, the Seattle Kraken rank 28th in goals for per 60 in the year, Dave Haxtell's last year. And why do I want to break that down? I mean, just for fun, I'll tell you how many goals for per 60 for the Seattle Kraken, ranking best to worst, 12th. So here we go. I'm talking to you about what Mike Benton and the guys were talking about. And what I'm showing you here, or I'm sorry, I didn't put that on there. So 12th this past season in goals for per 60 compared to Dave Haxtell's last season, 23-24, goals for per 60, the Seattle Kraken were again 28th at 2.11. So why am I showing you this? Because when I'm listening to Mike Benton and the guys speak, they're talking about how the defense suffered under season 1 and season first and last under Dan Bylsma. And what I'll tell you is, according to these numbers that I just read off to you and I showed you on Money Puck, yes, they did. But you know what also was different? The goals for were up compared to what we saw under Dave Haxtell. And I didn't even do the playoff year. That's a little bit of an outlier for a lot of different reasons. But I just wanted to compare the season where Dave Haxtell got fired, the season where Dan Bylsma got fired, because you heard it multiple times. It was just under an hour, Mike Benton talking to the different guys. And over and over and over again, you heard defense wasn't good enough. Defense wasn't good enough. Listen, everydayers, OGers, You know, I have not been thrilled with the Seattle Kraken defensive efforts since the first season. So I'm not going to sit here and defend bad defense. I'm not. It's never been great. Now our defensemen, I think I've seen the value in them moving on as I watch the team more, because for me, I mean, the guys were talking about defensive structure. They were talking about, the defense just wasn't good enough, but also talking about how we should keep the defensemen. That's because, as I continue to tell you, this is not a team holistically that has ever been good at defense. Some of what we're seeing in these numbers is because Joey Daccord has been phenomenal for the Seattle Kraken, especially in these last two seasons. Some of what we're also seeing as far as the demerits is because, especially our forward core, they get lost in the sauce defensively. And it creates a lot of work for our goaltenders and a lot of work for our defensemen. So while I agree, defensive efforts for the Seattle Kraken, not great. I just want to, I disagree with what I understood the podcast to say, that it was because of simply systems. Now, systems have something to do with it, but what we were seeing, and they alluded to this on the Kraken Audio Network, is that under Dan Bylsma, the onus, the impetus was on being fast forward checking, using their speed to get through the zone. Now, under Dave Haxtell, the guys were talking about how it was like a boring style of hockey and everyone has to work really hard on defense and yada, yada, yada. Again, my argument is that the Seattle Kraken defense has never been great. Other things that were mentioned on that podcast that I think are worth taking a look at, the defensive woes, and we'll get into this a little bit more with regard to what the offseason looks like regarding trades, regarding young blood. And then, of course, they also talk about assistants. And will Lane Lambert be able to bring in assistants, to which Mike Benton reported and said multiple times that there have been reports that all of the assistants will be retained. So that's really interesting to me. I mean, we know Jessica Campbell is in. I like Jessica Campbell. I want Jessica Campbell to stay. However, putting Jessica Campbell to the side, assuming she's not with the Seattle Kraken, she's just any assistant coach. I don't like that you hire a head coach and that head coach isn't able to outline their assistants and pick and select their assistants. I'm not saying, just hear me here. I am not saying I want Jessica Campbell gone. I do think that improvements need to be made on the power play. That's another thing they talked about. Does Jessica Campbell remain with the power play? At one point, I thought we were going to have her on the PK, which, and then I guess that got switched around anyway. If she does remain with the power play, because I'm assuming that the reporting is correct that she will remain with the Seattle Kraken. If she does remain with the power play, I really want to see how Lane Lambert is going to scaffold, is going to support her ongoing growth, while also getting the power play to a much better place than it has been. Not just last season, but we've had special team problems before. So I know that was a lot. I wanted to break that down because, again, I think the podcast was kind of putting the heat on Bylsma for not doing enough to get this team where it needs to be defensively. And, I could take that. In the silo of the season. However, it's not like he was given a golden goose for a team, a roster A to Z, soup to nuts, that is responsible defensively. Because, baby, I'm here to tell you, we hold fast, we stay true, and we keep it real. And the Seattle Kraken have never been great as a defensive-minded squad. Coming up next, though, as I mentioned, a few other things regarding Jason Botterill were mentioned. Assistant coaches, trades, young talent. We're going to talk about that. And then I'll close the episode giving you a little bit of my estimation, or what I would do if I were the GM of PWHL Seattle, looking at those protected lists, but really more so looking at the players that are available, either as free agents or unprotected. We'll talk about that coming up on Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Wonderful Pistachio. If you are looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious, you can crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachio. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you feel fuller for longer. Now, some people like the no-shell variety. Some people like the zen feeling of being able to crack open a shell. Either way, Wonderful Pistachios has you covered. Great snack for on the go, especially the no-shell options, because you're not leaving a mess. But if you're home, relaxing, watching a Kraken game, PWHL action, you can crack all the shells that you want. Go for it. Either way, we want you to get snacking and get cracking with Wonderful Pistachios, a snack that packs a protein punch. You can visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, Seattle hockey fans. Yes, I know. I got on my soapbox and I looked at the stats and I told you how I feel about defense. And I hate that there's not actual stats that we can look at that really give us a true barometer of defensive effort. It's just super hard in hockey. Allison Lucan has been on the show to talk about that before. We didn't have Allison on last season at all, and that's probably why things went south. I apologize. I would like to take responsibility for my part in what was last season. A very difficult season for us, right? For you Kraken fans, for me as the host of Locked On Kraken. And I got to think it's because our guest with the most appearances outside of the network, that is, because I think Ann Kimmel's up there, Armando Velez is up there. Just this week alone, Gil Martin, right? Or then the last 5 days, Gil Martin alone is probably up there. But we got to get Allison Lucan back on the show. Would love to hear what she thinks and how she would break down the difference between a team, focused on offense and then they suffer defensively, but a team that focuses defensively, so then they suffer offensively. What's the balance? What does that look like? Is that rover positionless hockey maybe the answer? We're going to have Allison Lucan back on the show. I'll reach out. I try not to bother the crew. This is their off season too. Lucky ducks. Anyway, it's their off season, so we'll see what we can get cooking for you. But on the podcast, what we also heard was Jason Botterill talking once again about young people, giving young people a chance. The guys, Ian, John, Everett, and Mike, really thinking that a Yanni Newman, even a Berkeley Catton, these are guys that we are likely going to see in the NHL. That's what everyone's thinking. Is that right? I guess we'll find out. Berkeley Catton, there might need to be an exemption. We've talked about that on the show before. Everydayers, you would know that. OGers, of course, you're here all the time, and I love you so much for it. What I found interesting is that Mike Benton stayed on this, and I guess Ian Furness talked to Jason Botterill outside of the show that I'm referencing for today. But Jason Botterill, and he alluded to this. I mean, but he mentioned everything in that press conference. It's like, we're gonna do trades, we're gonna do the draft, we're gonna work through our farms. It's like, yeah, no, duh. Those are all of the ways that you can build your roster. So he's non-committal, but I think with Ian Furness, he was a little bit more committed, or alluding to the fact that this Seattle Kraken team is going to make the changes that they can, that are necessary through trades. That means some of your favorites might be out the door once the trade window opens on the other side of the NHL draft. It hurts, right? And it's inevitable. It hurts and it's inevitable, especially because we've already seen some transactions for the Seattle Kraken. The Seattle Kraken have signed Ben Meyers to a one-year deal. Let me make sure I have the whole list over here. So Ben Meyers is a one-year, one-way contract at $7.75 AAV. Then you have Caden Hamill, who is a 3-year, two-way entry-level contract at $908,333 AAV, starting in 25-26. He's a defenseman. Ben Meyers, of course, we saw him last year. He's one of the forwards who we saw with Coachella Valley, as well as the Seattle Kraken. We've got Josh Mahura, a defenseman, 27 years old, a 2-year, one-way contract extension, $907,500 AAV. That takes him through 26-27. And we have John Hayden, who is a 2-year, one-way contract extension. So unlike what we've seen from Ron Francis, we're seeing a decent amount of one-way contracts here under Jason Botterill early. And these are kind of glue guys, fill guys. So what does that exactly mean for what the Kraken are trying to build here? If we look at in 25-26, Isiman, unrestricted free agent. Capo Caco, restricted free agent. Ty Cartier, restricted free agent. Riker Evans, restricted free agent. Stevenson, 7-7 guy. Don't think he's going anywhere. I don't even know if he can, right? Brandon Montour, he better not go anywhere. But some of the things on this show that were tossed around, is Vince Dunn a guy that you put together in a trade package? What is Riker Evans? Has he done enough to make the big league? If Yanni Neiman is coming up, what does that mean for McCann, Burakovsky? I know a lot of people have talked about Schwartz and Eberle. I would keep both of them. That's just me. Matt Beniers isn't going anywhere. Shane Wright isn't going anywhere. Is Ellie Tolvanen someone that, we trade away? But if we've got these young guys coming in on these one-way contracts, the only way, you're making space while also, I guess giving these guys a fair shot is to make some room through trade. And even that's not guaranteed unless Cartier, uh, Riker Evans are these guys that don't make the NHL roster this coming season? I mean, I don't know. We don't know. We don't know yet. It's still super early, but you know, we gotta see what's going on here. On the active roster right now, 16 of 23 players, 39 of 50 standard contracts. Annual cap hit, or I should say the current cap space, just a scotch under 20 million. So, and that's been mentioned in the comments before. I think it's going to be interesting to see what moves are made and, what are we actually going to see when it comes to hitting the ice with this Kraken squad. I don't know. I mean, we need trades. There's no question about it. We need trades for sure. And so I'm not mad at that. I might be once we see what the moves are exactly. I might be. But it's inevitable. There's some stagnancy in this organization. I don't think the roster is built particularly well as constructed. But again, those runners on base, those belong to Ron Francis. And will we see more casualties based on things that weren't quite up to snuff under Ron Francis as a GM? And will Ron Francis be one of them? I still don't love this. I don't love this roster. I don't love what we're seeing here. I think it's interesting, though, and what might be telling, and why I think Isimon has a shot, why I think Jaden Schwartz is going to stick around, Capo Caco, is because what we're also hearing is that Jason Botterill wants to attack the net more, which the Kraken absolutely should do. And it's something that Dan Bilesma talked a lot about. Everyone needing to attack the net. Shane Wright, I think, is another guy that does a good job there. Are there players out there that are going to help in that regard better than what we have? Burakovsky is the big question mark for me as far as skaters. I didn't even get into goaltending, but Burakovsky is the question mark. Do you give it another year to figure out if it's going to work? Yes, I know. Injuries. I get it. I know. He wasn't injured last year. I like Jared McCann, first player we ever extended. We're not setting him up for success. I mean, it's kind of like a Will Borgen situation at this point for me. I don't want to see McCann go. I would understand it. And what value could you get? What kind of a player could you get? But that player has to fit into what now Lane Lambert and Jason Botterill have, and hopefully have as the vision, I should say. And hopefully those guys are on the same page. But we have a new GM coming to the Emerald City. We'll have a team also playing at Climate Pledge Arena, and that is the GM of PWHL Seattle, yet to be named. I'm very curious what name they're going to come up with. That's going to be exciting, but it will be PWHL Seattle, at least for the first season. And I'm going to tell you who is protected. 3 players from each of the 6 teams. But more interesting is who is unprotected. We'll talk about that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. I got to tell you, I don't, I would never want to be a hockey GM. I don't know that I'd be any good at it. I do enjoy dissecting the decisions that GMs make. That's why I'm a podcast host. But this stuff is not easy, man. This is not easy. I don't know why anyone would want to do that job. I'm sure it pays a lot better than being a podcast host. And it should, because this is insane. This is a lot of work here. And I don't like having to manage and juggle people and agents and salary caps and projections. And, I'm vibes. I'm all vibes. I think I'd probably be a better coach, because you get with what you're dealt, and then you go with what's going to give you the edge on the ice. And that's the thing. We just don't have enough to give us a real edge on the ice. I think the biggest edge we have right now is a net with Joey Decord. What happens with Philip Grubauer? I don't even know. What do we get if we let go of Gruby? I don't know. But like I said, these are the things that are on my mind in the off season. But we got to talk about the PWHL, because unlike the WNBA, they actually tell us who's protected, which I think is the only way to do it. Like what? But I want to talk to you about who is protected here in the PWHL draft. Meaning they cannot be selected. Okay, so here are the players that have been protected from each team. I'll start with the Toronto Scepters: Renata Fost, Blair Turnbull, Daryl Watts. Didn't protect Sarah Nurse. I don't get that one. Ottawa Charge: Emily Clark, Gwyneth Phillips, and Rania Salvalainen. Oof. No Brianne Jenner. No Emrance Mashmeyer. Very interesting. This New York Sirens: Sarah Fillier, Ella Shelton, and Micah Zandy Hart. No Carpy? No Abby Rock? Okay. This one, everyone knew who Montreal is going to protect. And Renee Desbiens, Marie-Philippe Poulin, and Laura Stacey. No surprise. Minnesota Frost protect Kendall Coyne-Schofield, Taylor Heisey, and Lee Steckline. Heck yeah. I like this. I do think it's tough to leave. It's tough if you're Minnesota. It's super tough to leave some of your young talent unprotected, such as Sophie Jakes, Rooney and Hensley. Well, let's see. Rooney is a free agent. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Yeah, that's tough, but you got to make some choices here. Okay. And the Boston Fleet: Aaron Frankel, Megan Keller, and Alina Mueller. That means perhaps the rumors are true. Hillary Knight to Boston? Hillary Knight to Boston? I don't know. So now that the protected lists are in, the exclusive signing window gives a 5-day period to sign a maximum of 5 players. No required minimum number of players who must be signed during this window. Any unprotected player or any player on an expiring contract is eligible to be signed. So, in addition to players like Hillary Knight, Sarah Nurse, who, Abby Rock, Alex Carpenter, who went unprotected, you also have players like some of my favorites, if I'm being honest. Like I mentioned, Maddie Rooney for Ottawa, someone that I think could be really interesting. So Elizabeth Giguere, Jade Downey Landry could be huge. Taylor Gerard, I love Taylor Gerard's game. I might pick her up. Maybe not in this first signing window, but Susanna Tapani is a free agent from Boston. Okay, let me get down to it. If I had to pick 5 players as free agents, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know if I pick Hillary Knight. I'm gonna go with Susanna Tapani from Boston. I'm going to go with maybe Claire Thompson. So I've got 1 forward, 1 D. I'm going to go Teresa Vanishova, who's a free agent from Ottawa. That's who I was thinking about. I'm going, you know what? I'm going to go, just when I thought I had it. I'm going to go Sophie Jakes. So I'm going to go Claire Thompson, Sophie Jakes. I have Natalie Spooner's a free agent. I don't think Natalie Spooner leaves Toronto, but Natalie Spooner is a free agent. That's crazy. Oh. Yeah, all right. Hillary Knight. Teresa Vanishova, Hillary Knight. Oh, no, I picked Susanna Topany. Susanna Topany, Teresa Vanishova, Hillary Knight, Claire Thompson, and Sophie Jakes. That's who I would take if I could as the PWHL Seattle GM. I don't know. Let me know. Who are you picking with your first 5 for PWHL Seattle? And of course, we will talk more about this on the Women's Hockey Report. Again, hate to be a GM. Not my forte. I'm vibes for sure. But Susanna Topany is a free agent. I'm going after her. I didn't think I was going to go after Hillary Knight, but then I was like, oh gosh, but Hillary Knight had a fantastic season. I'm going off of like a 2-year period. The first year wasn't as great. No, you take Hillary Knight. And then Teresa Vanishova is a free agent. Yeah, I'm picking up Teresa Vanishova for sure. Claire Thompson and Sophie Jakes. I like the upside, young defensemen or young defenders. And yeah, I think you can wait on a goaltender, especially Gwyneth Phillips is not available. Emrance Mashmeyer, you got to kind of see where that's going. I don't know that Mash is actually leaving Ottawa. Corrine Schroeder is available. I do like Corine Schroeder. The inconsistency is a little tough, but when Corine Schroeder is on, woo, that's a good goaltender there. So I might consider Schroeder if one of those picks that I have is not available because Kara Mori snuck from under me and grabbed that up. But Corine Schroeder is another player I would consider. Haley Skamura is available. You know, at least as of right now. Another wrinkle is each of the 6 inaugural teams initially protect 3 players. After an inaugural team has relinquished 2 players, so like for me, I picked 2 players from the Minnesota Frost. Once they have relinquished 2 players, whether through the exclusive signing window or the expansion draft, so that things could get a little loco crazy on the expansion draft, that team is permitted to protect 1 additional player, increasing their protected list to 4 players. Interesting. I don't know. I don't love this draft. These draft rules, they definitely make things interesting. They're gamifying it for sure, but I don't know. It's kind of crazy. Let me know what you think about my picks and listen to the Women's Hockey Report where we will pick for PWHL Seattle and PWHL Vancouver on an upcoming episode. Until then, be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, hold fast, stay true, and loud and proud we say, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.